Best Buy.
Yeah, so I have represented one of these colors at each point during my Best Buy journey and at other organizations as well. When I was red, the first thing that I needed was a framework, a consistent way to think about how I wanted to frame up what I was going to talk about. And to create that compelling story, I borrowed something old from, I believe it's the 70s with Campbell, but its performance is a function of three and only three things. Okay? First, it's the talent. Do you actually have somebody to go after something? Next thing is engagement. Do they actually have the motivation, the interest, the energy to pursue it? And third and lastly, do they actually have an opportunity to do so? And what I really like about the simplicity of this message is it can actually apply, and I think good stories do apply, to things beyond the world of work. So I'm an IO psychologist, and I usually start with work, and I keep trying to bring things back to work, but this kind of helped centered me. So one of the ways to think about it is if you're learning to play a musical instrument, if you're interested in dance, even what kind of a parent you are, sports, baking, and of course the world of work. If you're not engaged, if you're not bringing your full self, you're not going to have full performance. And that speaks volumes to the leaders who you talk with. So of course, also during my journey, I've spent a lot of time in yellow being somewhat successful, being able to land the message. And the part that I really struggled with here is it's almost like the bad reputation that Americans get when they go abroad, right? And so what happens when somebody doesn't speak your language? The prototypical American, I'm not saying you do this. We just say the same thing louder, right? We just keep repeating it and keep repeating it. Don't you understand? Or we make up words like caro instead of coche, right? How effective is that? Not really the most effective. And so what I would challenge those of you who self-assessed as being yellow, be willing to try something new and to tell the story in a different way. For me, I love to lead with data, but it was actually, can you instead lead with the people who you're telling the story about? Okay? And then finally, green. If you're green, like, kudos to you and give yourself a pat on the back. And if you want to accelerate that even further, create storytellers in your organization, people who can carry on that message for you, because the greatest impact of engagement isn't when it's coming from HR, it's when it's coming from peer-to-peer, individual to individual, and everywhere in between. So who am I? It's not really important. What is important is I get to lead a fantastic team, and I get to work for an organization that values my contributions. If you want to learn more about me, half of you are already on your phone anyway, you can go to LinkedIn. All right, so how about the organization that I have the privilege of talking about today? So I'm going to commit a bad speaking faux pas. You can tell I'm not a good speaker to begin with, so I can see no one's surprised here. And I'm just going to read at you. Okay? Best Buy generates nearly $40 billion annually. The company offers expert service at an unbeatable price more than 1.5 billion times a year to the consumers, small business owners, and educators who visit our stores, engage with Geek Squad agents, or use BestBuy.com or the Best Buy app. 70% of the US population lives within 15 minutes of a Best Buy store, and the company also has operations in Canada and Mexico. Nationwide, Best Buy has more than 1,400 stores and locations, including large format and Best Buy mobile stores, and employs more than 125,000 people. And just for the sake of space, what didn't make it on there is every minute that our stores are open, they take in 400 pounds of recycling, which if you're wondering what that equates to and to put something on it, it's 2 elephants an hour. So just if you're interested in how the math kind of works out on that kind of thing. So hearing some of the messages earlier, and for me to be in the moment, why did I do this? So the first thing is to actually show our communications team and legal, who may at some point be listening or feedback getting back to them, I can actually stay on script a little bit, right? So far I'm starting off okay. More importantly than that though, what's important for me in the message here, so this is all public facing. This is all information that you can access right now on BestBuy.com. It's the way the organization would like to portray itself to our world of customers, potential employees, and investors. So what do you notice about these statements? To me, being an analytical person, first thing that jumps out at me is how much quantification is going on here, right? We've got dollars, we've got trips or visits, those kinds of counts. We've got US population being segmented. We've got time, we've got number of locations and number of employees. So what I learned early on in working at Best Buy is that quantification matters, and to have a compelling story, you have to know your audience. In this case, the audience really appreciates having the numbers, at least as a backdrop. So creating a compelling story. So the first thing that I did after getting to know my audience a little bit better is to start with the end in mind and saying, what matters most to you? And regardless of the leader that I talked to, I got the same three answers. They care about their employees, they care about their customers, they care about the overall profitability. Who is surprised by this? Okay? Consequently, what they may or may not realize through that is they also care quite a bit about engagement. And engagement is a huge competitive advantage and strategic lever. So to give you some examples of how this played through, what we did is segmented our survey data, and we've been doing this for a number of years, so everyone in the organization was comfortable with our color scheming, of which you would either be green, yellow, or red. And for the purposes and simplicity of this presentation, I'm just showing you the delta between green and red, but you'll get the overall story arc. So from a financial perspective, 360 basis points difference between our red locations and our green locations in comps. Now, I'm seeing some confusion there, so let me stop for a second. Why did I say basis points? We're largely a group of HR people. Because that's my audience. That's the way they like to receive information. They talk basis points with their financial partners. They talk basis points with their marketers. So as an HR professional, I wanted to talk basis points with them too in order to land my message more effectively. By the way, if you're wondering what this actually means for a given leader, this is the difference between you being on a performance improvement plan with little to no hope, quite frankly, or you getting maximum bonus. So this delta is massive to our leaders. Okay, from a customer perspective, 120 basis points in NPS, which on the Best Buy side is kind of our holy grail of customer satisfaction indices. An employee, no surprise, largest delta there, 980 basis points in turnover. So each of these metrics weren't selected by me. These are our leaders' metrics that matter most to them to represent the categories that matter most to them. The other thing, too, that can happen when you are in a large, dispersed organization is this concept of what if we all came together and operated as one Best Buy? What would that actually mean for our organization? And in this case, you can see just a small improvement in engagement nets over $84 million. Massive effect to the bottom line. So for all those project managers that are complaining, if I only had this system and it costs $30 million, if the organization would only invest and do something in this way, which costs $10 million. And for an organization that's gone through a transformation, is looking to become a high growth company, these pennies matter. And the strongest part about this is, what does all this cost? To get 980 basis points on key employee metric, 360 basis points key financial metric, 120 basis points key customer metric, this costs nothing. This is the way we should actually be showing up and behaving day in and day out. Of course, for us to do that, we needed to have a mindset shift. So the first shift that we wanted to do was to steer leaders away from the notion of employee engagement as a construct and refine that to what does it actually mean and how does it actually feel day in and day out, which is what we've called everyday engagement. And for everyday engagement to come to life, it requires a lot more than the old way of doing things. So when we look at our least successful leaders historically, and this is true not just at Best Buy but elsewhere, what is the typical employee engagement rhythm? It's typically you've got an annual survey. You've got some portion of the employees who complete the survey. Afterward, the manager has some version of results. And what does the manager typically do? They choose one or two things, put them into an event, usually not a very meaningful event, and they check the box that they've done engagement for this year. Not much happens the rest of the year. It's coming time for another employee engagement survey, so what happens? Manager dusts off their notes and says, don't you remember when we had crazy hat day? Don't you remember when we had Sundays at work? And why are they doing this? Because they want artificially for the employees to then give them a higher score on engagement. This isn't the way to get to the kind of profitability, customer, and employee metrics that I talked about earlier. So instead, what we've asked is that you craft a plan, and not a stale plan that's going to be 365 days. That's way too old. Instead, craft some meaningful actions that you can go after. The moment that you've reached those, pause, reflect, celebrate, and then what's the next need that the team has, and let's go get that. And let's reinforce that day in and day out. Now, moving to the everyday engagement strategy, the other thing that's really difficult is you've got to have a high level of, I hate the term soft skills, so I'm going to call it the really difficult skills that leaders need to have, because they need to engage with their employees, showing individualized consideration. You actually have to know something about the people you lead in order to engage them. These one-off events, these things that are great for the team as a whole, these programmatic things, they're necessary, but they're insufficient conditions in order to get the kind of results that you're looking for. And again, going back to frameworks that have helped me, so if you look at Csikszentmihalyi's High's flow model, that's been particularly helpful when you want to think about individualized consideration. Again, the thing that I love about this model is you don't have to apply it to work, you can apply it to anything you're interested in. Sport, dance, music, baking, whatever the case may be. So essentially what the model says is you're trying to drive a strong balance between the challenges of the task that you're being presented with, and then the skills and your confidence in those skills and actually in order to complete that. And so let's think of a trivial version. So boss gives you something super, super easy to do. Can you mail this letter for me? I was watching old Arrested Development reruns the other night, and there's a really, really good episode where Job throws a letter into the ocean. So that's why it's in my mind. So say they give you something like that, and then that becomes the norm of the kind of work you get. How do you immediately feel? You're bored, you're apathetic. And the truth is, your performance in something that's so simple actually starts to degrade, even though you completely have the skill to handle it. Now let's go the other way, where coming from this conference, CEO has the expectation that every single employee in your company tomorrow will be 100% engaged every day. How are you feeling there? You're stressed, you're overwhelmed, and you probably don't know where to start. So again, if you can meet the employee where they're at, design the work in a meaningful way to them, and continually get feedback on that progress, that's the way that you encourage everyday engagement. The other thing that we've really tried to highlight here is the preciousness of each and every interaction that occurs, because each and every interaction is an opportunity to either make a deposit into that employee's energy bank, or it's a withdrawal. And you think about what things that you can do when you have a really, really hefty balance. You get innovation. You get going way, way above and beyond to delight customers. You get incredible results. You get 360 basis points of comps. Okay? You can imagine how the other way goes too. Let's just say best case scenario, it's turnover. Okay, so the other thing that we wanted to do to shift is to create more of a two-way street, to more of a dialogue. And so, again, if we go back to the old way of doing things and the prior considerations, oftentimes the annual, or however often you do it, engagement survey is either the wish list or the complaints of the team members with the manager expected to resolve all these. And somewhat it almost feels like a little bit of a negotiation process or a little bit of a ransom I can bring my best self to work, but you better do X, Y, and Z if you want to see that. Doesn't feel really good on behalf of the manager, doesn't really represent the employee, and it's not super effective. So what we've really tried to uncover and reinforce is the notion of there is actions that are going to take place by the leader, but there's also actions that are going to take place by each team member. And some of that can be as simple as, you're saying you want more opportunity for X. Well, then I need to see that you can be prepared when you're given Y so that when X presents itself, that you can jump on it. It doesn't have to be, use the term from earlier, it doesn't have to be rocket science, but it's important that we consider that engagement is the conditions that occur, that great employee experience, but it's also a personal individual choice that's affected like things like your disposition, spillover, what's happened recently with you. And the more that the leader and the employee, and employee to employee, can take time and uncover those, the more powerful it's going to be. The other thing we did from a storytelling perspective that I don't have slides on, but I just wanted to comment on briefly, is we've taken the effort to highlight for given leaders and to actually tell their story end to end. So what you saw here was I started with the end, what the metrics actually look like, without the series of behaviors that lead up to that. Instead, what we did, or in addition, I shouldn't say instead, we actually took people through the journey of what does it look like to be a GM of a store that used to be red and go to green? What were the behavioral changes that occurred? What does the leader attribute that success to? What does the team leaders attribute that success to? What do the individual contributors attribute the success to? So that's been our journey, and also my journey in being able to tell a different and more compelling story with data. So I'll turn it back to Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.